this paper is about how we can use the satellite image for continuous auditing and monitoring. So specifically, we are interested in the port management. So now we are leaving the Audit 4.0 world because previously we rely on the data from the audit client. However, now we can use exogenous data from the other sources such as IoT, also the satellite images. So finally, using the exogenous data, we can identify significant risk with the real-time data. So that is a difference between the Audit 4.0 and then previous world. So actually, because you believe that, why I mentioned this one, because if we are living the Audit 4.0 world, that means we can use the exogenous data. That's why, because teaching the audit exogenous data every spring semester for PhD student. So for example, this is a paper from the Yugu, Jundai, and Mikos, and then he mentioned this paper yesterday. So if we want to apply the continuous auditing and monitoring for the real world, what do we have to do? We can use exogenous data. Specifically, Yugu, Jundai, and Mikos mentioned that they can use a satellite image, and that the image can be used for the ESG assurance. So you might believe that what is the difference between our paper and their paper? So I will talk about more detail about that. So because we will use a satellite image, and also we want to develop the continuous auditing and monitoring using the satellite image. So you might believe that it's similar. However, we can focus more on the supply chain management. So because why people want to use a satellite image? Because actually we are living the big data world. That means we have lots of data. However, if we do the research, people complain about that. Oh, we have a limited data. Also, if you look at every single academic paper, you can find that because of the data limitation, we cannot perform this type of the research. That means we have the limited data share. And that means we have the data, limited data exposure for auditing. So that's why we want to use a satellite image for auditing, and then also continuous auditing and monitoring. And then also, it's quite expensive if we want to collect the data. So specifically, if we want to monitor specific areas and then considering the multiple areas and the multiple type. So that's why we want to use a satellite images. Also, it is mentioned in the Yugu's paper. However, if I revisit this one, if we want to clarify some gray area for auditing, we need to use the exogenous data. So specifically, there are many exogenous data, but we want to focus on the satellite image for this paper. So we want to use a satellite image. So previously, people know that there are many papers to use a satellite images. However, why we want to use a satellite images at this moment? Because we can use the AI and the computer vision technology at this time. Specifically, now we have a better quality data. So previously, if you look at the satellite image, there is nothing. Almost you cannot recognize anything. However, we have a high resolution data. So data quality was improved. And also, if we match the data with the ArcGIS, we can clearly identify what is the object. So also we can easily, relatively easily collect the satellite image. So because the cost was lower, cost become lower. And also we can frequently collect the data bi-weekly and then monthly. So now we have the improve the data quality. So what do we have to do? If we want to analyze the data, we need a tool. So there are many tools to analyze the images. However, in this case, we want to use a machine learning. So there are many machine learning tools, but we want to use use a CNN convolutional neural network. So if you use a convolution, in that case, you can identify the objects by changing the pixel. So we use a CNN in this case to identify the objects. So for example, you believe that if you process the images, you have to start with the detection. So if we want to process the images, we start with the detect what is the objects, and then after that, we have to recognize the images. So using the CNN, we can recognize, detect, and segment. So this is a part of the segment. So you might believe that, so as I mentioned, that this is not the first paper to use a satellite images, also apply the machine learning techniques to analyze the images, the satellite images. For example, in the chart paper, the Kang et al.'s paper, they use a parking lot images to predict sales. And then also, I believe that in this room, everyone knows this paper, the David Wood's paper. They use the drone images to count the inventory. So if we want to use the inventory management, we can potentially use the drone images. So it's not the first paper. However, we will discuss what is the difference between this paper and our paper. Also, our paper is a more methodology paper. So we discuss there are some technical limitations. So if we want to figure out the technical concerns, what do we will discuss what we have to do. So because we focus on the port rather than other things, because you could use the satellite images for ESG assurance. And then also they use David also used the drone images to count the inventory. However, in this case, we are interested in the port management. So why you believe that we really care about the port? Because there are many stakeholders who are involved in the port management. So also the port risk management can have a high impact to every stakeholders, such as customers or companies, even for policymakers. So because everyone knows the disruption of the port Long Beach in 2021 and 2022. So you can see one example, because before COVID, port information systems was well maintained. So we can see that if we compare this area, there is nothing. So because there is no bottleneck in the supply chain management. However, if you look at this area, because after COVID, what happens? So you can see that most of the containers are accumulated here. So that means there are some bottleneck. Also, if we look at the news articles, you can find that. So because most of the containers could not be unloaded in the Port Long Beach because it caused a huge cost to everywhere. So that's why port management is very important. Also, we have to apply the continuous auditing and monitoring for the port management so we can find out needs. So actually, because I talked to Min-seok yesterday, and then so this page is developed is consulted by the professional, and then because he did not know how to write the research paper previously, however, Professor No provided some advice how to write the paper. So if we want to develop the research questions, we can start with a why. So because we believe that there are some needs to apply the continuous auditing and monitoring in the port management. Specifically, if we want to manage the port, we want to consider the cost as well. So if you believe that if you develop the account information systems, usually we consider two things, budget and time frame. So it is the same thing. Also, if we want to suggest to innovate research to analyze specifically container in the port management systems. So if we want to analyze the containers in the port, what do we have to do? So we have the satellite images, and that if we want to analyze the container images, we have to use the computer vision, AI, and the machine learning. So I will discuss about what is the details, how to use the machine learning techniques here. So because you can see some images of the container. So it is this part, because if you just capture the satellite images, it's a 3D images. That so you can see only 2 dimensions. However, if you look at the stacked container, it should be the 3D. So what do we have to do? So you believe that, you can develop, you just develop the methodology which can apply only containers. It's not true, because we can use this one for the detecting the building and also the recognize the buildings. So it can be applied to other areas for urban planning, for specifically the policymakers as well. So this is a kind of full chart how we analyze the data. So because as I mentioned that satellite image has a low resolution. So that means we have to improve the image quality. And then after that, as I mentioned, that image processing has 2 stages. First, we have to detect the images, and then after that, we have to recognize the images. So using the zero-shot segmentation, so we detected some images, some objects. And then after that, we recognized some containers. However, we cannot fully recognize containers because, as I mentioned, the containers are usually stacked. So what do we have to do? If we want to analyze stacked container, in that case, we can use shadows. So I will discuss more details about how we use shadows here. And then finally, we can develop 3D mapping here. So we improve the quality of the image, the satellite images using the enhanced super resolution generative adversarial network. And then after that, so as I mentioned that, so if we want to detect the specific objects, what do we have to do? We can use a segment anything model, which is developed by the Meta. So you might believe that why this is important, because if we just detect the objects using the CNN, so if we just directly apply the CNN, what happens? Because you can see the how huge the false negative. So because, for example, highway can be detected as an object. However, we are not really interested in the objects. The highway, local road is an object. However, we are not interested in. So we want to focus on what are the objects. So if we want to detect the specific object, we can use a segment anything. However, it is a just detection. There is no label, so we need to still use the CNN to label each object. So using the segment anything, we can detect the containers. So basically, if we want to analyze a container, in that case, we have to decide the size of the containers. And then after that, we can identify what is the shadow, because if we look at the container image includes some shadows. So I will discuss more details about the shadow and the images in the next slide. And then after that, we can determine what is the size of each container. So this is based on the segment anything, we can detect where is a container, where are containers. So in this case, and then after that, if we want to identify the flow of the containers, basically the height of the containers, whether the containers are stacked or not, we have to use the shadow detection. We need to do the shadow analyzation. So to do that, what we have to do is first we identify whether container where container is, and then after that, so you can see that this gray area is the shadow. So we can detect each container. However, based on the size of the container, whether we can identify this is a real container or not. And then after that, we can also extract some shadow images. And then using the shadow images, we can identify the height of the containers. So for example, if we analyze the shadow image, the container shadow images, for example, the shadow is on the ground, what happens? So we believe that container is on the ground. However, if we see that one container is covered by another shadow, in that case, we believe that one container is slightly lower, and then another container box should be slightly higher. So we can see the hierarchy between the container box on the port. And then also, we can find that the container box is stick. However, there is no shadow. So we can assume that. So that means their height should be the same. So basically, it can help us to count the number of the containers in the port management in the port. So that means we can improve the port management systems using this methodology. So first, if I summarize this one, so first we use a satellite images, which is a remote sensed images. And then after that, if we want to determine the container heights, we use a shadow. So if we want to use a shadow, we have to extract the specific shadow images by comparing the container sizes. And then we convert the 2D images, the 2D container box images to the 3D. And then finally, we can calculate the number of the containers in the port. So if we, depending on so we analyze different ports, and then so we can get this accuracy. So however, you can see validation with the manual counting. So it's the same as this method is similar with David Wood's method because they also work with the auditors and then they just count the number of the inventories. So it's quite similar. However, we try to find out how to validate our methodology now. So I can go back to our concerns, what we want to address using this one. So because as I mentioned that we want to analyze, we believe that continuous auditing and monitoring is needed for the port management systems because many stakeholders are involved in the port management systems, and then also we believe that the risk management systems in the port have a huge impact to the stakeholders. So we believe that continuous monitoring and continuous auditing should be needed for the port management systems. So if we use this one, what happens? So we believe that we can use the automated counting. So because we want to develop automatic systems using the IPA. So it's a similar idea. So using the satellite image, we want to manage the inventory systems automatically. So using this one, so it is based on the Audit 4.0. So we want to use the exogenous data. And then if we want to exogenous data for Audit 4.1, what we have to do? In that case, we have to know how to analyze data more effectively and efficiently. So we believe that satellite image can provide the opportunity to us. So also, if we want to analyze the image more accurately, in that case, we just discuss what is a possibility. So we can just extract the satellite image, and then we want to detect each container box. And that if we want to count the number of the containers, in that case, we can use a height. So we need we need to use a height. So by using the shadow detection, shadows. And then finally, we can convert the 2D images to the 3D images. So we believe that it can impact the audit quality, also finally financial reporting as well. So also this is the extension, because you might believe that, oh, I believe that port management information systems already know everything, even though there is some disruption in the port systems in 2021 and 2022. However, why you believe that you really need these systems? Because we believe that if we look at the near port areas, for example, this area and this area, we believe that there is a possibility to use our model. So specifically, if you look at the near port areas, so usually there are intermodal facility as well as outdoor storage. So if we look at the port management systems, they do not cover these areas. So that means if we are really interested in the inventory and also port management systems, we have to care about these areas as well. So for example, if you go to, finally, so there are some challenges here. And then, so because they do not cover this one, the intermodal facility and outdoor storage. So that's why we want to use a satellite image to manage these areas. And then finally, we can do the continuous monitoring, unify the continuous monitoring and auditing for the port management systems. So still, we have some concerns. Still, there are low resolution and low frequency. Even though technology developed, still satellite image is not very clear comparing with the drone images. So however, we believe that it's a more macro level images. So that means we can drill down from the satellite images to the drone, the area which we can use the drone images. So I think also finally we can do the real continuous auditing and monitoring using this one. So this is the conclusion. So we believe that if we use this method, because this is a more methodology paper, if we suggest this methodology for continuous auditing and monitoring in the supply chain systems, and specifically port areas. And if you want to count the inventory, and also if you want to manage the inventory for the port or air cargo, in that case, you can use these systems. But even though there are many other systems, other ways, however, we can see the more macro level insights using this one.